What you just saw was a quote from an article written by Jeff Gluck on The Athletic. Not only did Joey Logano defend his 2024 championship, but he defended the current playoff format as a whole, and you can hardly blame him. If you were constantly told that the one thing you've spent your whole life trying to achieve was illegitimate, and that your 3 championships were Mickey Mouse titles, you would be irritated too. I spent the entire Labor Day weekend thinking about this quote, because I wanted to figure out if there was actual truth to what he was saying, or if he was just gaslighting and blowing smoke up everybody's ass. After a lot of intense deliberation, I came to the conclusion that he was absolutely right. Some fans were quick to write off what he said because it came from the mouth of one of the sport's least popular drivers, but just because you don't like the person that's saying something doesn't mean that what they say is always wrong. There have been several instances where drivers have had significant playoff point advantages over their competition, only to blow it in spectacular fashion and miss the championship 4 altogether. This video is all about those moments, so if you're a fan of any of the drivers who were misfortunate enough to be in this video, you can send your hate mail here. You can't make a video about choke jobs in the NASCAR playoffs without mentioning Kevin Harvick's 2020 season. He was the most dominant driver that season by a country mile. He won 7 times in the regular season and would enter the playoffs as the number 1 seed with 57 playoff points. The eventual champion Chase Elliott had 20, which was very respectable, but it was nowhere near as good as Harvick. He scored 2 more wins in the playoffs and entered the round of 8 with 67 playoff points. His spot in the championship 4 was all but secure, and the championship was a foregone conclusion. His name was being engraved onto the Bill France Cup, and he had it in the bag. And then Martinsville happened. Kevin's performance in this race was something that only Milo Murphy could be proud of, because anything that could go wrong did go wrong. He started 6th and dropped all the way to 30th at one point due to a poor handling car. He had incidental contact with Matt Kenseth, which cut down one of his tires, and he had to come down pit road under green and lost 2 laps in the process. Even though he got one of those laps back after a quick caution, he would remain a lap down until he got the free pass on lap 401. He made a furious charge in the closing laps and came within 1 position of saving his season. Kyle Busch was the poor soul occupying that position. His last act of desperation failed when he tried to wreck him going into turn 4 and ended up wrecking himself. He would finish 17th and would fail to make the championship 4. A lot of fans believed that Harvick was screwed over by the format, but what they conveniently forget is that he had a 42-point lead over the cut line going into Martinsville, and that was despite what happened at Kansas and Texas. The only scenario where he could have missed the championship 4 is if a driver below the cut line won the race and he was somehow outpointed by Denny Hamlin and Brad Keselowski while he didn't collect any stage points. All of these things happened on that fateful November day, which is why he went from 42 points above the cut line when the day started to 8 points below it when it ended. Kevin Harvick had the biggest choke job in playoff history, and the only person that can be blamed for wasting a golden opportunity to become a 2-time champion is Kevin Harvick. We now move on to another driver whose first name starts with the letter K, and that is Kyle Larson. He entered 2022 as the defending champion and was seeking his 2nd straight title. His 2022 season wasn't as good as the previous year, but that was to be expected because most drivers don't win 10 races in a single season. He entered the playoffs as the 4th seed with 19 playoff points. To put that into perspective, he was only 6 points behind the eventual champion Joey Logano. He was 18 points above the cut line going into the round of 12 cutoff race at the Charlotte Roval, which was a decent gap, but it was still a far cry from safety. He collected 13 stage points by finishing 6th in stage 1 and 3rd in stage 2. He was running 13th and was 29 points above the cut line with just 16 laps to go, all he had to do was keep the car on the track and his spot in the round of 8 would be secure. And then disaster struck. He was forced to come down pit road with just 11 laps to go with a broken right rear toe link. He broke that toe link by slamming into the wall. By the time he left pit road, he was 5 laps down and was a mere 7 points above the cut line. It looked like he would escape by the skin of his teeth, and then a caution came out for a sign falling on the track. Christopher Bell, who was running 7th at the time, decided to pit for fresh tires because he was 45 points below the cut line and needed a win to advance to the next round. He restarted 11th and moved all the way up to 2nd, and then another caution came out, which sent the race into overtime. Chase Briscoe would pit for fresh tires, and Larson couldn't do anything about it because he was 5 laps down and couldn't gain any positions. The destiny that he once had was now being controlled by others. Briscoe took full advantage of his 4 fresh tires and finished 9th, to edge out Larson for the final spot by a mere 2 points, while Larson finished a dismal 35th. Harvick's demise was caused by poor performance and poor execution, while Larson's demise was caused by a self-inflicted mistake. This elimination was particularly devastating because he went on to win a completely meaningless race at Homestead Miami Speedway 2 weeks later. If he had been able to advance to the round of 8, that win would have gotten him into the Championship 4, but alas, it wasn't meant to be because this format was created to prevent dynasties, and I am confident in my belief that we will never see one again. Martin Truex Jr. was seen by many as the odds-on championship favorite in 2023. 2 wins and a remarkable amount of consistency allowed him to win the regular season championship in a landslide. He entered the playoffs as the 2nd seed with 36 playoff points. He was actually tied with William Byron, but Byron got the tiebreaker due to having more wins. The eventual champion Ryan Blaney only had 7 playoff points and was the 12th seed. Blaney would go on a Linsanity run for the ages and would win his first championship. Truex Jr. retreated to his secret base and would suffer an epic collapse. He did not score a top 5 or a top 10 finish in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs and only finished inside the top 10 twice in the final 10 weeks of the season. The only thing that kept him in the title hunt were the 15 playoff points he earned for winning the regular season championship. Unfortunately, those 15 points would not be enough to turn an abysmal playoff run into a championship 4 berth, as he suffered an engine failure at Homestead and finished 29th, which put him 17 points below the cut line going into Martinsville. Unlike the previous year, his season would not be saved by a Martinsville miracle as he sputtered home to a 12th place finish, while Blaney advanced to the championship 4 with a win. Martin's collapse in the 2023 playoffs was so bad that he went from being the points leader to finishing 11th of the 16 playoff drivers. If that isn't the true definition of a collapse, then quite frankly, I don't know what is. If you're a collapse connoisseur like myself, then last year's playoffs were right up your alley because we didn't just get 1 collapse, we got 2. Kyle Larson entered the playoffs as the number 1 seed with 40 playoff points, while Christopher Bell was the 2nd seed with 32 playoff points. The eventual champion Joey Logano was the 9th seed with only 7 playoff points. Larson and Bell were 2 of the best drivers that season, while Logano finished 15th in the regular season point stand-ins and had to rely on a Music City miracle just to even make the postseason. To say that he was mediocrity personified would have been the understatement of the year. Logano was initially eliminated from the playoffs in the round of 12, but he was put back in after Alex Bowman was disqualified for failing post-race inspection. He would be dead last of the 8 remaining playoff drivers and was at a significant playoff point disadvantage compared to Larson and Bell. He needed to win one of the next 3 races to keep his aspirations for a 3rd title alive, and that's exactly what he did as he outdueled Bell on a fuel mileage strategy call to secure his golden ticket to Phoenix. Bell was 44 points above the cut line going into Homestead, while Larson was 35 points above the cut line. Bell would shrug off his Las Vegas disappointment by finishing 4th and would be 29 points above the cut line going into Martinsville. Larson was running 2nd early in the race when disaster struck in the form of a flat tire, which would send him to the back of the field. He was able to overcome this mishap and chase down down Ryan Blaney for the lead with just 13 laps to go. The Valley of the Sun was in his sights, but in typical Kyle Larson fashion, he got way too aggressive and spun himself out. To add extra insult to injury, his pit crew let him down with a slow stop and he came out 9th. He then proceeded to fade in the closing laps and finished 13th. He would be 7 points below the cut line going into Martinsville due to Tyler Reddick's win and his lack of stage points. He finished 3rd the following week and collected 12 stage points, but it wasn't enough because his teammate William Byron collected 15 stage points and was always one step ahead of him. And there's also the fact that a 3rd straight driver below the cut line won a race in this round, and that honor would go to Ryan Blaney. Bell had a horrible, no good, very bad day. He qualified 16th and ran poorly all day long. He inexplicably spun himself out while racing against Corey LaJoie. He lost all of the track position that he gained in stage 2 when he had to come down pit road a second time for a loose wheel. He got lapped in the final stage because of the god-awful car he was saddled with, and unlike Kevin Harvick 4 years earlier, he would not be able to get back on the lead lap, and he completely overdrove the corner going into turns 3 and 4 on the last lap when Bubba Wallace gifted him the one position that he needed to advance and rode the wall, which had been made illegal the previous year. It took NASCAR 27 minutes to come to the obvious conclusion that Bell's wall ride was a safety violation and dropped him from 18th to 22nd, which officially knocked him out of the championship 4, and that was all she wrote. Game over. Joey Logano would shock the world and cement his place in NASCAR history by becoming just the 10th driver to win 3 or more championships. The only thing Larson and Bell could do was watch and wonder what could have been. What makes their duel collapse so inexcusable is the fact that Logano won his 3rd title despite an average finish of 17.1, which made him the worst statistical champion in NASCAR history. Larson and Bell were the top 2 seeds and had significant leads over the cut line throughout this round, and they both collapsed like a Jenga tower. You can blame NASCAR, you can blame the format, and you can blame Joey Logano and his ability to win like a pest, but it doesn't change the fact that Larson and Bell choked big time. They could have gone to Phoenix and raced each other for the title, but in the end, their championship hopes evaporated like the sand in an hourglass. While there are many instances where you can blame the playoff format for drivers failing to reach the ultimate goal, there are also many instances where that is simply not true. The playoff format is the modern-day equivalent of Steve Bartman, and the reason I say this is because it is often used by fans as an easy scapegoat to explain why a driver fails. If you're one of the many individuals that don't like this format, it's easy to say that these drivers didn't win the championship because of that damn playoff format. But if you put your bias aside and look at these examples objectively, you'll realize that the drivers themselves were the cause of their own downfall. I'm not saying the playoffs are perfect by any means, but I think it's irrational to always blame it for a driver failing to make the championship 4 or any other round for that matter, even when it is clearly the driver's fault. If a driver blows a huge lead in the playoffs and it's not due to something that was out of their control, then it should be called out for what it is, a choke. Plain and simple. While NASCAR is not the same as a stick and ball sport, it is still a sport, and when it comes to the art of choking, it should be held to the same standard as every other sport. In honor of this dedication, I have created 3 golden rules in regards to the NASCAR playoffs. Survive in advance, be aware and know the rules, and last, but certainly not least, we can't forget about the most important rule of all.
Don't get eliminated!